Hi everyone, welcome to Just Roots Kitchen Intuition. Today we are going to be making two really quick and easy holiday sides. One is a oven roasted sweet potato and butternut squash that's glazed with a maple glaze. And you can substitute those for different root vegetables if you'd like, or other types of squash. We're also doing a festive green bean. So this one's going to feature pepitas, toasted pepitas. You can also use slivered almonds if you prefer. Some nice thick slices of garlic, and both these recipes incorporate the use of some zested citrus. So let's get started. We'll walk through what you're going to need to make these two recipes, and we'll get going. So as I mentioned, obviously we need green beans and sweet potatoes and butternut squash. I'm also going to use a couple cloves of garlic. That's for the green beans. Zest of 1 lemon, zest of orange, some Parmesan cheese. I'm using dairy-free. You can use whatever you have on hand. I'm using about a 1/4 cup of maple syrup for the maple glaze. Some cinnamon, some black pepper and salt. And that's pretty much it for the ingredients. And then when moving into supplies, a zester of some sort, even a box grater is great. Some measuring spoons if you like to use them. Mixing bowl, a colander for draining your green beans. We're going to blanch them first. And I'm using a cast iron pan, or just a non-stick pan is fine for toasting your pepitas. I'm using a big tall, it could be any kind of pot that has a lid for getting our water up to temp so that we can properly blanch our green beans. And then you can use a silicone mat or a sheet of parchment paper. The glaze can be sticky. It can be stubborn to get it off of a pan. So if you don't have that, you could use tin foil, but I like to use parchment paper. And then a nice size sheet pan or two. So you want your vegetables to be spaced out when you're roasting them. So just keep that in mind. You might end up using two. Little trick with parchment paper. It's kind of hard to get it easily laid out flat. So if you actually take it, sprinkle it up, might seem a little counterintuitive. You have a lot more, it's easier to work with at this point, and you can lay it more flat. Pro tip. Okay, let's get started. So first we're going to want to get our oven preheating. I'm going to set it at 425 on roast. So we'll get that going. And we're going to start peeling. I've already washed my sweet potatoes. We're going to start peeling them. I should mention that peeling is an option. You do not have to peel them if you don't want to. I just think with a dish like this, it makes it nice and smooth. But go ahead and leave those skins on if you want to get some extra fiber. I'm just using a peeler. You can also use a nice sharp paring knife if you have one of those. And we're going to be peeling both our squash and these sweet potatoes. We're going to be cutting them into about, an inch size cube. And the point here is just to get everything roasting evenly. Typically takes about 30 minutes to get the roast. And then we like to put it in a broiler for another couple minutes just to get a little bit of the crisp on top of the potato and squash. So that looks good to me. Moving on to my next one. You could certainly omit the sweet potatoes here. Something I like to also do a maple glaze on are beets. So if you've got a bunch of beets in your CSA, consider swapping it here. Getting off all those little extra remnants. All right, now I'm going to get this station a little bit clean, toss these in the compost. And it helps to have a heavy weighted knife when you're working with really thick root vegetables or squash, just to get that initial in half cut. Sweet potatoes are a little bit easier than any kind of hard winter squash. But you can either start by cutting it in half or whatever you'd like. You just want to have a flat surface to work on because that's a bit safer. So I'm just going to cut mine a couple times and then try to get as even as possible cubes. And I'm going to toss those into one of my mixing bowls. We're going to be putting this glaze on before putting it in the oven, so just keep that in mind. So I just like to cut into cubes, so I'll do strips first and then finish up with a even size cube. You don't want these too big because you want to limit how much time you're spending here, especially if you're making a whole bunch of other things for the holidays. And this is a great dish to be able to feed a lot of people. It's very filling and pretty easy. You just chop everything up, mix a quick glaze, stick it in the oven. Okay. And so that's one potato. So we're looking for about, 4 cups of sweet potatoes. This recipe can be easily altered if you're cooking for more. You can double it. If you're cooking for less, cut it in half. Pair really well with roasted turkey, or if you like to do a ham or a vegetarian dish. All right, and then we're going to move on to our butternut squash. So I am going to peel these. The easier way to cook butternut is just to cut it in half, stick it in the oven. Then you can remove the skin a little bit easier, but for this recipe, we're going to remove the ends of the squash first. You always want to try to have as many flat surfaces to cut as possible to keep it safe. So I put it on the butt end so it was flat and not rolling around. And then I've got some seeds that I'm going to clean out. You can use a spoon to do that. Super simple. I'll show you here. Just reaching in here into the pocket that holds all those seeds. Getting those shelled out. Now I'm going to do it over my compost so I don't make a big mess. One of the more persistent squashes I've had. Go ahead and do that to both sides. You can certainly roast those seeds if you like. I just like to feed them to my chickens. Great. Then we're going to want to peel the skin here. So you can use a peeler if the skin is a little tough. If it's quite cured, then you can certainly use a paring knife, doing your best to leave as much of the squash intact. Now I'm using a pretty small butternut, but they have huge ones at grocery stores and through our CSA, so you could always do a couple, or if you have a nice big one, maybe make a little more of the glaze. I'll do the same thing here. I love the smell of anything in this cucurbit family. You might get a scent of cucumber or melon when you're peeling them. Those are all related crops in the same family, so you're smelling that. Fabulous. So we've got our 2 squashes. We have of our squash. This stuff's going to the compost. And we're going to proceed to cut it into cubes just like we did. I'm going to do some strips here. You may find you have some little extra seeds hanging out. And cut those. And again, just looking for about an inch cube. So depending on your size, you may cut it in fourths, cut it in half. And at this point, your oven should be getting pretty close to preheated, so it'll turn out pretty well. If you're a step ahead, you can get out some olive oil or whatever oil you like to bake with. You can really use anything, canola, avocado. I like to use lighter oils than extra virgin just because extra virgin can have a pretty strong taste. It doesn't like to go super high heat, but this recipe's not that high. So we are going to be cooking at a, for a roasting temp pretty high, and that's because we're trying to have a nice quick time in the oven to leave room for other things that you might be cooking for the holidays. Great. All right, now we're going to mix in our maple syrup, which is about a 1/4 cup. If you want it less sweet, no problem. If you don't want to use maple syrup, you could use honey, brown sugar, stevia, agave, whatever you need. And also going to do about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm not going to measure it out, but you certainly can. One, 2. And then we're going to do some salt and pepper. So I do about a teaspoon of salt. This is a 1/2 teaspoon, that's why I'm doing 2. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. You can always add more if you'd like. I'm a big fan of pepper, so. And then we're going to do some cinnamon. 1 teaspoon is great. It's a really nutty, sweet, earthy flavor. And then we're going to zest a orange into here. Now our orange is going to bring a lot of brightness. Now, if you have a small, by the way, I rinse these really well under hot water. You can use a zester like this, and I can also demonstrate a box grater, but it's pretty much the same deal. Oh my gosh, that smell is so nice. So I am doing the whole orange. I'm not going too deep into the pith or into the rind. I'm just getting sort of that outer layer. Something about cinnamon and orange that's really smells like the holiday season to me. Some other root vegetables that you could add to this would be celeriac, rutabaga. You could roast some kohlrabi, any like mild flavored root vegetables, carrots even. Great with a maple glaze. You can save the rest of your orange to eat fresh, slice it up, maybe juice it. Oops, make some fresh juice to go along with your meal. All right, that looks pretty good to me. Got most of the rind there. Just gonna wipe off the back of it, get it in there. Now we're gonna give it a stir. Get everything mixed evenly. You want to stir it really well. That maple syrup is thick. It's going to want to sit at the bottom. Feel free to add any of your favorite warming spices to this. Ginger. You could do some nutmeg, allspice. Even like a pumpkin spice blend would be good. They're all hopping out today. All right, and then we're gonna lay it down on a baking sheet. And there's my oven. Okay. I'm gonna try to fit all of mine just on one sheet. The more spaced out they are, the crispier they are. Just keep that in mind. And for now, I'm going to put it on the bottom rack of my oven, but later I might move it up to the top rack when we switch to broil. We're going to do about 30 minutes on these, and we can check them in 30 minutes. And see if we're ready to broil, or just see we want to stick them in for a little bit longer. It's going to depend on your oven and how thick you cubed everything. So I'm going to set a timer. We're on the bottom rack. All right. So just make sure your station's clear because we're moving on to a new recipe. To start, I'm going to have you salt a pot of water, and you can salt it to about, I don't know, a teaspoon is fine. We're just using this water to blanch. So go ahead and, get it heated on high. And if you have time, what I like to do is remove the ends. I just use my fingers. You can also line them up. You can line the green beans up. Oh, dropping everything. You can line them up and cut them with a knife, but those, especially the end that has the stem on it, it doesn't really tend to get very tender. So these we're gonna get this pot of water heated up, and then we're gonna blanch them for about 3 minutes. So it's helpful to have a colander. And we're going to drain them out of the hot water. Sometimes you can also either just run cool water over them or stick them in a pot of actually ice water to really stop the cooking process. Basically, we're tenderizing and getting them to being fully cooked so that when we then cook them on the skillet, they are like just getting ready to brown and be a little bit charred. It's really nice. So my water is going to be heated in just a second. We'll go ahead and process those green beans. In the meantime, we're going to prep some of the toasted pepitas, and we're also going to get our garlic ready. So with the garlic, I'm just using peeled garlic, and I'm going to cut it into slices. And I'll show you in a second on the camera how thick these are. And you can use as much garlic as you'd like. I like to use about 2 cloves. So I don't want these too thin because I want them to, oops, there you go. I want them to not burn, and I want to keep them as whole as possible. Like, I'm just gonna wait for 1 second before moving on and get our green beans in the pot. You can do the same thing with this other clove of garlic. I like to do these sort of in slivers just because I think it looks really pretty when it's plated. And I'm doing a little prep so that when it comes time to cooking, we're almost completely ready to throw it all together. You have a really large clove like I just did, these sort of elephant cloves. Sometimes I like to cut those in half. This recipe calls for 1 to 1.5 pounds of green beans. You can double this recipe as well, or cut back what you need if you're only going to eat, this much or half of that. Just cut it in half or a fourth. So these are really only going to cook for about 3 minutes in that salted water. And to really get the cooling process, you can use some ice in your colander, or you could just run cool water. Just gonna touch the lights in. Giving those a little bit of a starter. And you'll know they're ready. They become super vibrant, having cooked for just a couple minutes. Okay, so I think the next step would be to toast our pepitas. So why don't we get some olive oil in a pan? I'm going to use you can dry roast them or you can use olive oil. It doesn't matter. I tend to use olive oil because I like to cook my pepita seeds with a bunch of different spices and herbs. And it's nice to have something to like roast those spices in. But if you want to dry roast them, just make sure that you're moving the pan a lot more. So I'm going to move my pan onto medium heat. You want to use a nonstick cast iron, those are fine. I'm going to use about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil. You really just want to coat the bottom of the pan. You don't want extra oil sitting there. So use as much as you need to coat the pan. And once that comes to a boil, by the way, you can turn it down. And then I'm going to get my pepitas ready. You can do about a 1/4 cup for this recipe, anywhere between a 1/4 and a half. But if you have lots of pepitas, I recommend making more and adding some spices and flavors to it and have it as a snack. They're really delicious. All right, I've got that pan on medium heat with a bit of olive oil. Now, you can totally get creative with your pepitas. When I'm roasting them for a snack, I always use paprika, chili powder. Sometimes I use garlic powder, salt and pepper. For this dish, just because it's more, I want to bring out the lemon zest, the green beans. I'm just going to do a really simple salt, pepper, and olive oil on these ones. Okay, maybe just another minute or so on those. So we're going to use the same pan for this green bean dish. So you want it to be large enough to incorporate all your green beans, your garlic, and eventually we'll be stirring our pitas back in, but we're going to cook them first, remove them from the pan, then add in our garlic to get it a nice toast. Then we will drain that garlic, add green beans to that oil, add some seasoning, salt and pepper, saute, zest our lemon, add some Parmesan cheese. We're going to toss everything together in the skillet, keep it warm, and then we'll use some fresh parsley, which I will get out now. So our squash and sweet potato have been in the oven for about 10 minutes now. And I've got a timer set for another 20. We can keep checking on those if you need, make sure they're not burning. Oven light. Looking good. Okay, so that's about 3 minutes on these. That's all you need. So I'm going to carefully remove them and strain them. Putting it right into a strainer with some ice. And really cool that down quickly. And I'm going to run some cool water over it for a minute. And now your pan should be heating up. It's on medium heat, and we're going to toss in those pepitas. Spread them evenly if you can. I did about a 1/4 cup. I'm going to sprinkle some salt and pepper on here. Go ahead and just do that to taste. Give my green beans a little toss to make sure they're all getting cooled down. And the color is now just such a beautiful verdant green, so bright it almost looks fake. That's a good sign. So we're letting those cool. I've got my garlic all chopped up, and I'm going to also do some parsley and pretty finely mince it. I'd say you only need a tablespoon. I always go a little overboard on the parsley. Love fresh herbs. And while those pepitas cook, the other thing we're gonna do is zest our lemon. So we only need a tablespoon or 2 of lemon zest. So it's probably, you know, it might be the whole lemon. And then you can also measure out your Parmesan if you want, or just eyeball a 1/4 cup. But I really finely cutting up this parsley. And get everybody in their own little section on the cutting board here. I'm gonna rinse my zester because I'm gonna use that again. I'm just gonna zest right onto my cutting board. Now you might start to hear a little bit of crackling. Your pepitas might be crackling. That's totally normal. That's a good sign. At that moment, I'll probably, once I hear that, I'm gonna start stirring them. We want them to be a little bit toasted and brown, but still remain green or golden. That's definitely a key. Not overcooking them, but to make sure that they've got a nice crunch, and they really do crunch up after being like lightly toasted. All right, I'd say that's about 2 tablespoons of lemon zest. And I'm hearing some sizzling, so I'm gonna go ahead and start my stir. You should already be seeing some color on these beans or on these pepita. Try to get them spread out as possible. And sometimes I like to have a plate out where I have a paper towel, and this is to drain off any excess oil from our garlic and pepitas when they're ready. Maybe take this a minute that you have, if you are right along my speed here, to do a little quick cleanup. Keep tending to those toasty seeds. I'm starting to see a little golden brown color. That's a good sign. If you're seeing burning or smoke, you're probably up too high or you haven't used any oil, but specifically if you're up too high, you're going to see smell burning, see burning. Add some olive oil and turn down the heat. Remove it from heat even if you can do that first. Looking pretty good. Now you could certainly keep this process rolling by using another pan, but it's kind of nice to use as few dishes as possible when you're making a huge holiday meal. These are the kind of recipes I like to make that I can sort of walk away for a while or get something else done, set the table, enjoy a glass of wine. I'm hearing that popping, kind of get a smell of popcorn in the air. Quite nice. So I'd say about like a third of my pepitas are brown or browning or golden. I'll show you what it's gonna be hard to see in this camera light, but I've got some beautiful color. If you take them out, you can hear they're sizzling still. There's some nice popping. And I'm almost there. Right, that looks good to me. Go ahead and I'm gonna drain these, leaving a little bit of room for when if I want to drain my garlic. Now, as mentioned before, when we first started this class, you can certainly use toasted almonds. Like if you cut them up, sliver them, that goes so well with green beans. I just unfortunately have an almond allergy, so I couldn't do that. I'm adding in about a tablespoon or two of olive oil, and I want to get like a tiny little layer on there so that I can fry this garlic. And I do not want to burn the garlic, so I'm going to keep a really close eye on it like I did with our seeds. And I'm going to show you what the pepita seeds look like. They're really beautiful. I've got some nice brown, but I still have some green color in there. Specks of pepper. It would be delicious. So you want the garlic to get pretty coated so it cooks evenly in the oil. And we wanted a golden color, so we just have these little golden slivers of garlic with our meal. Smells so good. In fact, I think these two dishes will time out really well together. I have about 12 minutes left on our roasting vegetables. Which is great because I think we'll only take a few more minutes to finish up this dish. And yes, we have 12 minutes, but they will go in the broiler most likely, depending on how they're looking, for a minute or two. starting to get some nice color on this garlic. If you're having any burning, you can add more oil. You can also turn the temp down. I'm looking for a golden brown. I'm just paying a lot of attention to these. And submerged in that oil. All right, so in a minute, we're gonna strain out our paper towels. We may need to add a little bit more oil. We're gonna add our green beans. We're gonna do some salt and pepper on them, saute them so they're a little bit lightly charred. Then we'll toss in our Parmesan, our lemon, our pepitas, and our garlic back in, some of that fresh parsley, and we'll be ready to serve. All right, I think we are here. And choosing a slotted spoon with a hole in the middle isn't the best, but a slotted spatula would be amazing. I ended up doing quite a bit of garlic for the amount of green beans I have, but that's because I'm a garlic lover. So I think it's always okay to double the garlic in the recipe. Unless you don't like garlic or you don't digest it well. Okay. A few more stubborn pieces to get out of the bottom. Then I'm going to show you that this sort of slivered look of the garlic is really beautiful. All right. I've got my heat is still on. I've moved it to more of a medium low. Here's our beautiful slivers of garlic, toasted. They look a lot like almonds when you make this recipe with almonds. Green beans going in. Great, drizzle. Maybe do salt to taste. I'm gonna do just like a quarter teaspoon. I like to use fresh grated pepper for this. Finishing pepper. And get stirring. We want to see the appearance of almost like bruising on these green beans, or they're browning, a little bit yellowing. So keep that heat up. If you need to turn it up, you can do that. We want it to be dry, not super wet. And in no time, we're going to add all this lovely stuff back in there. Keep them moving. So this is a great alternative to for a holiday side using green beans that doesn't have tons of dairy and cream. If you have people in your family that have a food allergy, it's still a really nice festive thing. You can totally skip the Parmesan cheese or use the dairy-free alternative like I'm doing today. I just want to show you what I'm looking for. I want to see this kind of beautiful browning of the bean, and I want to see it on more than one side. We're not making them crunchy. We're not trying to dry them out. We're trying to keep a nice succulent bean that just has a good stiff skin. Well, I'm really starting to smell some of that maple coming from the oven. I'm gonna give it a smell. Oh, it smells so good. All right, my green beans are getting pretty close. I'd say just a minute or two more. If you're seeing a lot of sticking to the pan happening, go ahead. Add a little bit of olive oil, or if you're trying to cut back oil, you can add some water. Now, because we use this pan for the pepitas and the garlic, you're gonna get some slight infusion and flavor of those in your green beans before we even add that back in, which is wonderful. If you want a less well done green bean, you can go ahead and stop it now. If you're looking for something a little more charred, leave it on for a couple minutes. So the skin should be slightly wrinkled, a little bit golden on the outside. Try to get that as evenly through all your green beans as possible. And know that they will be cooked because they already were blanched. One thing to note with green beans too is if during the summer season when you have a lot of them, you can basically do this blanching that we did in our pot ahead of time. So later you can blanch them, stick them in the freezer, pull them out, and you could unfrost them and then immediately just skip to this part. So keep in mind that's also an option. It's a quicker option if you want to do some meal prep ahead of the holidays. All right, so now I'm going to turn my heat actually off, and I'm still, especially because I'm using a cast iron, I'm going to have a lot of like resonant heat in the pan, which means it's a great time to go ahead, toss in some lemon zest, give that a good stir to incorporate because I missed it. Release some of that beautiful fragrant flavor. You can taste it for salt. See if you'd like to add more salt. Putting a nice toast on that zest. And it's a great way to add that astringent lemony flavor without making the green beans a little too wet by putting in fresh lemon juice. Parsley's going in. And stir. They're going to be really bright and fresh and tangy. Colors are beautiful. Next, I'm going to do my pepitas and my garlic, just because they're both on this paper towel. You can lift it right up, toss it in. At this point, I'm going to remove it from heat, and just simply moving it off the burner that had heat. Or if you're using a gas stove, just turn it off. Then you've got these beautiful colors coming together, different shades of tan, green, beautiful and bright. Oh, gorgeous. So that dish is done. Even plate it on the plate you used before. Honey. All right, now I have 2 minutes left on my sweet potatoes. So I'm going to pop them out and take a look. Careful, it's hot. It's at quite a high temp. Those look perfect. I don't even think they need to go in the broiler. They're getting a beautiful crisp. Oh my gosh, smells amazing. I've got exactly what I wanted, which is a slight bit of browning on some of them. They look cooked all the way through. I can easily pierce them with a wooden spoon. That looks great. Now, if you do want them a little crispier, I do recommend just sort of mixing them up a bit so the bottoms are now facing up or as much as you can. Then you can stick them back in the broiler for a second, but otherwise your meal is finished or your holiday sides are finished. And yeah, I hope you have happy holidays and enjoy some of the pairings of these like sweet maple citrusy root vegetables and this bright zingy green bean dish. Take care.